One day, the world-honored one in Jeta's grove at Anāthapiṇḍada Monastery spoke to his disciples and instructed them as follows: "My disciples, I wish to see you become inheritors of the Dharma, rather than merely inheritors of material things. I say this to you because I have deep concern for all of you. If you become mere inheritors of things, then people may say that the followers of Shakyamuni have renounced the world for the sake of acquiring things and not to inherit the Dharma. My disciples, assume that on some occasion I had not partaken of some of the food offered to me as alms. Assume that, just at that moment, 2 of my disciples arrive hungry and tired. Assume that I say to them that the food was being offered to them to be eaten as they wished, and that if they did not wish to eat it, I should dispose of it where the growth of the grass would not be hampered, or throw it into the water where there would be no possibility of harming living things. One of them would be sure to recall that at one time the world-honored one had instructed them, 'I wish you to become inheritors of the Dharma, rather than inheritors of things.' He remembers that this food is one of those things. Thus, rather than eat the food, he prefers to bear his hunger and fatigue for an entire day, and he does exactly as his thought dictates. Another of the Buddha's disciples had this thought in mind: 'I shall partake of this food and satisfy my hunger, be relieved of my fatigue, and thus spend one whole day and a night.' And let us assume that he carries this out. My disciples, I would not hesitate to praise the attitude of the first disciple, for he has, for a long time now, lessened desires and been satisfied with things as they are. He continues to remove the poisoned arrow of desires. It is because I have deep concern and care for all of you that I have instructed you to become inheritors of the Dharma and not of material things." Upon having given these instructions, the Buddha stood up from his seat and returned to his room. Immediately after the Buddha left the lecture hall, Shariputra addressed the disciples and said, "Friends, what does it mean for the Buddha's disciples not to reside in a state of tranquility and not to study it? Also, what does it mean for them to study tranquility?" The disciple asked, "Friend, was it not because of the wish to know more about this matter that we have come from afar to be near the Buddha? Please enlighten us on this matter, and we shall take your instructions to heart as we hear them." Shariputra then said to the monks, "Not to study how to enter the state of tranquility means that while failing to discard the material things that the Master has instructed us to discard, one discards the mind and abides in a state of tranquility, and thus becomes arrogant, lazy, and degenerate. Studying tranquility means to discard the material things that the Master has instructed us to discard, and, without becoming arrogant or lazy, to hasten to abide in a state of tranquility. Friends, craving is evil. So are anger, hatred, and concealment. Blind passions, envy, avarice, flattery, self-indulgence, arrogance, and idleness are evil. Friends, in order to discard these evils, there is the middle path. The middle path means the way of the Eightfold Noble Path. By this path, right wisdom can be cultivated and enlightenment attained. When the Brahmin Janasoni of Shravasti started for the outskirts of town one day in a horse-driven cart covered with a white canopy, he met the traveling ascetic Pilotika. The Brahmin asked the ascetic, "Where are you headed for this midday?" To this the ascetic replied that he had gone to seek guidance from Gautama the Buddha. The Brahmin then inquired of the ascetic, Is he truly the wise one? To this the ascetic replied, How can I ever fathom the knowledge and wisdom of Gautama the Buddha? Only those equal to Gautama will ever perceive the knowledge and wisdom of Gautama. To this the Brahmin said that Pilotaka was excessive in his praise of Gautama's virtues. The latter replied, How can I be excessive in my praise of Gautama's virtues? He is the greatest of all people and gods. The Brahmin retorted, Well then, what do you find in Gautama that is so exceptional? To this, Pilotaka replied, It is as when the keeper of an elephant forest enters the forest and sees the huge footprints of elephants. He knows by those prints that the elephants in the forest are large. Likewise, I have seen 4 of Gautama's footprints, and have come to know that he is the fully awakened one, that the Dharma is exquisitely presented by him, and that his disciples practice the right way. By the 4 footprints, I mean the following 4 virtues. Some kshatriyas, wise and eloquent, tried to refute the teachings of Gautama, but every one of them, when confronted by Gautama, taught the Dharma quickly and became his followers. This is the first of the 4 footprints. Again, a wise Brahmin tried to defeat Gautama in an argument, but he became overjoyed when he heard Gautama's instructions, and he became his follower. This is the 2nd footprint. Again, an eloquent and articulate householder tried to defeat Gautama in debate by employing various means, but upon meeting Gautama, he was profoundly struck by the teachings and became a follower. This is the 3rd footprint. At yet another time, an ascetic with a mind as sharp as a razor had fully prepared himself to refute the teaching of Gautama. However, in the end, he too became Gautama's disciple. He remarked that formerly he had thought that he was an ascetic who had renounced all worldly things, but he now realized that he had become a true ascetic, and this only through the guidance of Gautama. This is the 4th footprint. It is by observing these 4 footprints that I have come to know that the world-honored one is the truly awakened one, that he teaches the Dharma exquisitely, and that his followers practice the right way. Then Janasoni came down from his carriage with its white canopy and, draping his robe on one shoulder, faced the direction where the Buddha resided, put his palms together, and uttered 3 times, I seek refuge in the world-honored one, the awakened Buddha. Suddenly he exclaimed, I shall go to meet the Holy One Gautama, and listen to his teachings. He then headed for the place where Gautama Buddha was staying, and having paid his sincerest respects, he relayed to the Buddha what Pilotika had told him. To this the Buddha answered, O Brahmin, the metaphor of the elephant's 4 footprints is not adequate. I shall now explain the metaphor for you. It is not true that an experienced elephant keeper would, upon entering the forest and seeing large footprints, immediately think that these were footprints of a large elephant. This is because there are female elephants, short in height and with large feet. Again, pursuing this further, even if there were large footprints, and the branches overhead were broken, he would not think that these were left by a huge elephant. This is because there are elephants that are tall and leave large footprints. And again, even if there were large footprints and the branches overhead were broken, and there were scars on the trunks of the trees made by elephants' tusks, still he would not think that these were left by a huge elephant. This is because there are large female elephants. Now finally, if there were large footprints with branches broken overhead and tree trunks bearing scars of elephants' tusks, and if, in addition, a large elephant were seen moving back and forward, lying on the ground, it is then that for the first time he would conclude that these were the footprints of a large elephant. O Brahmin, as this example indicates, when the Buddha appears in this world and teaches the Dharma, the sons and daughters of good families become mendicants. Upon having faith and following pure practices, they turn away from all desires and learn true contentment, just as birds take to wing. They keep the precepts, practice meditation, and cultivate wisdom. They therefore enter the first stage of meditation. O Brahmin, these are known as the footprints of the Buddha and the scars of the elephant's tusks. Note, however, that it is not only on the strength of these observations that the disciples who receive these instructions arrive at the conclusion that the Buddha has attained the realm of the awakened one, that the Buddha teaches the Dharma well, and that the disciples of the Buddha practice the right practice. O Brahmin, those disciples will progress step by step in their pursuit of the way, and, advancing in various meditations, they will attain the power to know their previous lives and those of others, to know the minds of others, and to know the end of their defilements. O Brahmin, these are also called the footprints and tusk scars of the Buddha. However, the disciples of the teaching will not say, the world-honored one is the truly awakened one, by observing only these signs. They will progress further, free themselves from defilements, and become aware that they have been released from defilements. O Brahmin, these are called the footprints and tusk scars of the Buddha, and, at this point, for the first time, the disciples of the teaching will say, the world-honored one is truly the awakened one. Janusoni was overjoyed. As though light were shed in darkness, or something covered over had been uncovered. He left the place vowing that he would remain a follower of the Buddha for life. At one time, Janusoni came into the presence of the world-honored one, and said, World-honored one, is an offering made to a Brahmin with the three knowledges the true offering? The Buddha asked, What is the nature of the three knowledges? The Brahmin answered, O world-honored one, the Brahmin of the three knowledges is well versed in the three Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Yajur Veda, on both his father's and his mother's side. For as far back as 7 generations, there must not be a single case where the family lineage has been stained. He must never be the object of derision. His family name must be honorable, and his livelihood pure. He must memorize the sacred books and incantations, and be well versed in the terminology, rituals, liturgy, interpretations, stories, and accounts contained in the Vedas. He must be clear with regard to the origin of words and grammar. Then, after having learned the Lokayata philosophy of materialism, and having mastered knowledge of the marks of a great sage, the Brahmin may well be called a Brahmin of the three knowledges. The Buddha then stated, O Brahmin, it is true that this is one version of the three knowledges, but it is not so when seen from the standpoint of the true teachings. To this the Brahmin asked, O world-honored one, what then are the true three knowledges? The Buddha then gave him the following teaching. O Brahmin, listen carefully to my teaching. First, a monastic, quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from wicked and unwholesome things, having thinking, reflecting, and the happiness and rapture born of seclusion, dwells, having attained the first dhyana, with the stilling of thinking and reflection, with internal clarity and one-pointedness of mind, being without thinking, without reflection, and having the happiness and rapture born of concentration, he dwells having attained the second dhyana. With the fading away of rapture, he dwells equanimous, mindful, clearly knowing, experiencing happiness through the body, about which the noble ones declare, he lives pleasantly, mindful, and equanimous. Thus he dwells having attained the third dhyana. Having given up pleasure and given up pain, and with the various disappearances of mental well-being and sorrow, without pain, without pleasure, and with complete purity of mindfulness and equanimity, he dwells having attained the fourth dhyana. In this state, the mind of my disciple is quiescent and clear, free of all wants and desires. His mind is not only clear, but also freed from calculation. It is ready to function at all times, and is firm and never to be upset by others. And when his mind is directed towards things of the past, then the happenings of the past from one life to 1,000,000 past lives, and beyond that, can be brought to mind. Matters such as his names and family lineage during past lives are remembered. Moreover, his professions, experiences, and lifespans, even down to their minor characteristics, are clearly recollected. It is at this stage that he acquires the power of knowing his own and others' past lives, whereby ignorance is destroyed, darkness is dispelled, and light comes into being. Next, he will direct his mind toward knowing the birth and death of other people. With divine eyes that transcend human sight, he is now able to discern that the noble and the base, the beautiful and the ugly, the happy and the unhappy, all appear and disappear according to their actions. Some commit evil with their bodies, mouths, and minds, slander the sages, and harbor impure thoughts. Because of these actions, they fall into the realms of hellish suffering. Others perform good acts with their bodies, mouths, and minds. They maintain, avoiding slandering the sages, and have the right attitudes and understandings. By virtue of their good actions, they are born in the realm of purity. This second wisdom is called knowing others' thoughts. In it, ignorance is destroyed, darkness is dispelled, and light comes into being. At the next stage, he directs his mind toward the extinction of all defilements. He clearly perceives the reality of suffering, the cause of suffering, the removal of suffering, and the way to the removal of suffering. Likewise, he clearly perceives what is defilement, what is the cause of defilement, what is the extinction of defilement, and what is the way to the extinction of defilement. Now, upon having realized this, his mind is freed from the defilement arising from human desires, the defilement arising from existence itself, and the defilement arising from human blindness. Thus, he gains the awareness that he has been freed from these bondages. There arises in him the knowledge that the life of delusion has come to an end, and the pure practices have been completed. That what had to be accomplished has been accomplished, and that he will never again experience birth in delusion. This is the third wisdom, called the extinction of defilements, whereby knowledge is destroyed, darkness is dispelled, and light comes into being. O Brahman, by the expression Brahman of the three knowledges, we mean a person who possesses these three wisdoms. To these instructions the Brahmin replied that, when comparing the three knowledges he had spoken of before with those of the Buddha, he realized that they were inferior, not even 1/16 as valuable, and he praised the superiority of the Buddha's teachings. One evening, The world-honored one, in the presence of the disciples at the lecture hall of the monastery, discoursed as follows: "Be like the moon, my disciples. When you beg alms, be circumspect in both mind and demeanor. Be humble, like a novice. At a layman's house, it is important that you be as humble as a novice at all times. Be as cautious as when one peers into an old well or looks down from the edge of a mountain cliff or into an abyss. When approaching a layman's home, it is well to bear this in mind. Kashyapa is like the moon when he begs alms, circumspect in both mind and demeanor, and humble as a novice. My disciples, tell me what kind of monk should beg alms at a layman's house." To this, the disciples answered that since they all revered the world-honored one as the source of the Dharma and the center of spiritual refuge, they would bear the Buddha's instructions in mind at all times. At that moment, the Buddha waved his hand in the air and gave the following instructions: "My disciples, just as my hand is unattached to space and is unbound, no matter which home you call on, a monk must not be attached. You should always bear in mind the thought of enabling those who wish to require things to do so, and of enabling those who prefer spiritual values to attain them. Just as we feel satisfaction in acquiring things for ourselves, try to find joy and satisfaction in what others attain. It is with this attitude that you must approach the houses of lay people. My disciples, wherever Mahakashyapa goes, he harbors no attachment to the house and is not bound in any way." My disciples, what do you think are the pure and impure sermons of the Buddha's disciples? The disciples simply asked for the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha then gave his instructions. "My disciples, I want you to listen carefully and ponder this. Assume that a disciple has the following thought in mind as he gives his instructions. I hope that people will listen to my sermon. I hope that upon having heard my sermon they will rejoice, and upon having rejoiced they will express their feeling of joy." To deliver a sermon with this thought is delivering an impure sermon. Again, assume that there is another who teaches the Dharma with the thought: the Dharma has been presented well by the world-honored one. Through this Dharma, in this world, one acquires instantaneous awards. Moreover, this Dharma enables one to realize nirvana, and it can be duly conceived by anyone who is learned and wise. It is for this reason that I want people to listen to the Dharma as I teach it, to realize attainment, and to practice the teachings. If he can have such thoughts, and if his instructions are in accordance with the Dharma, and if he expounds the teachings with deep compassion, then this is called a pure sermon. My disciples, remember that Mahakashyapa taught the Dharma in such a manner. I truly expect you to teach the Dharma in the manner of Mahakashyapa." At one time the Buddha, with many disciples, left the Jeta Grove Monastery and entered the country of Kosala to teach the Dharma. Along the way, the Buddha saw roaring flames rising into the sky. Avoiding the flames, he sat on the seat prepared for him and said to the disciples, "My disciples, can you see all those roaring flames?" The disciples answered that they could. The Buddha then said, "My disciples, tell me, which do you think is better, to embrace these roaring flames, or to embrace the soft arms and legs of a Kshatriya maiden, a daughter of a Brahmin, or the woman of a householder?" The disciples answered, "It would be far better to embrace the soft arms and legs of a young lady, since there is no telling how painful it would be to embrace the roaring flames." The Buddha said, "My disciples, I say to you that those who break the precepts, act against the Dharma, and hide such actions from others, act like mendicants, though they are not really mendicants, or like pure seekers of the way, though they are not such, and whose minds are corrupted and filled with impure thoughts, should embrace the roaring flames, because embracing fire is better than embracing the body of a maiden. The reason is that, in the former situation, the pain and agony may cause death or something near death, but it does not constitute the cause of falling into hell. The latter can become the cause of falling into hell, where there is endless pain and agony. The Buddha continued, "My disciples, what do you think of a strong man who ties his legs at the shin bone with a strong rope and violently rubs his legs? In doing so, his skin is torn, his muscles are damaged, his sinews are cut, his bones are broken. The damage reaches the bone marrow and finally stops there. Under these circumstances, there arises the question whether he prefers to undergo these pains or receive the hospitality of a wealthy kshatriya, a brahmin, or a lay devotee. My disciples, I say to you that for those who are inferior, who have discarded the precepts, and who have acted against the Dharma, it would be better to have both legs crushed. The reason for this is that in the former case, one's suffering is limited to dying, or the excruciating pain that approximates the pain of dying, but it does not cause one to fall into hell. In the latter case, one's actions become the cause of falling into hell after death." The Buddha continued, "My disciples, which do you think is better, to have one's sides slashed by a strong man with a sharpened sword, or to be met veneration by a rich kshatriya, brahmin, or lay devotee? Or again, which is better, to have a flaming red-hot metal plate wrapped around one's body by a strong man, or to receive food offerings from the heart of a rich kshatriya, brahmin, or lay devotee? Or again, imagine that a strong man with a red-hot, flaming metal tongue drops a red-hot ball into one's open mouth. The ball burns the lips, mouth, and tongue. It will keep burning the throat, chest, and intestines, and then burn right through the body and drop out from the underside. Or, in contrast to this, imagine receiving the food offering of a rich kshatriya, brahmin, or lay devotee coming from the heart. Which is preferable? Again, say that a strong man grabs hold of your head and makes you lie down on a bed of steel, glowing in flames, with a steel pillow. How does this then compare with accepting an offering of bedding made from the heart, from a rich kshatriya, brahmin, or lay devotee? Again, imagine that a strong man were to grasp you, holding you upside down by your feet. He then tosses you into an iron pot with flames blazing, leaving you bobbing up and down like a bubble in a boiling pot. Now, how would this compare to being offered a room by a wealthy kshatriya, brahmin, or lay devotee? My disciples, I wish to say to you that all these types of physical pain do not become causes of birth in hell, but those who violate holy precepts act in defiance of the Dharma, and then receive offerings of faith from the wealthy. They create the cause of lasting suffering. Therefore you must think, those who practice offering are granted great benefits, and we shall receive clothing, food, mats, and medicine as offerings in such a manner that our becoming mendicants will not be in vain. In thinking about oneself, one is benefited when one exerts oneself with diligence. The benefiting of others also results from such actions. When the Buddha finished his instructions, 60 of his followers spat out warm blood. Another 60 disciples all declared in unison that the Buddha's path was extremely difficult, and left it to return to lay life. Another 60 mendicants were freed from attachments and relieved of their cravings and desires.